My name is Ethan Mitchell, I'm 32, and this morning I woke up to 14 missed calls from the family I haven't spoken to in 6 months. The same family where my sister Rebecca screamed, "Why don't you just disappear?" All my parents nodded in agreement. The same family I walked away from that night without arguing, just quietly closing the door behind me. 6 months of silence. Then suddenly, 14 calls. My phone keeps lighting up as I stare at it, wondering if I should answer or let the past stay buried. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to walk away from toxic family dynamics. Trust me, this journey gets intense. And you'll want to stick around to see if I answered those calls. Growing up in suburban Boston as the oldest child, responsibility was tattooed onto my identity before I could even spell the word. Our family home was a modest colonial on a tree-lined street where appearances mattered more than authenticity. My father Thomas, a successful investment banker with a perpetually tight schedule and tighter expressions, instilled in me early that excellence wasn't celebrated, it was expected. My mother Margaret, a former elementary school teacher who quit to raise us, reinforced these expectations with passive-aggressive comparisons and conditional affection. Then there was Rebecca, my sister, 3 years younger and worlds apart in how our parents perceived us. While I was the responsible one with straight A's and practical ambitions, Rebecca was the social butterfly, the creative spirit. The one whose minor achievements were celebrated like Olympic victories. The pattern established itself early, Rebecca shined. I existed in her shadow despite outperforming her in nearly every measurable way. "Your sister is more sensitive than you," my mother would explain whenever I questioned the disparity in attention. "You're stronger, Ethan. You don't need as much encouragement." By the time I reached high school, I'd accepted my role as the family workhorse. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, captained the debate team, and secured scholarships that would minimize the financial burden on my parents. Meanwhile, Rebecca struggled academically but excelled socially. When she barely graduated, my parents threw her an extravagant party. When I was accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, I received a firm handshake from my father and a distracted, "We knew you would," from my mother. "They've always been harder on you because they know you can handle it," my best friend Jason would say whenever I confided in him about the unfairness. But even in high school, Jason recognized what I couldn't yet articulate. "They're not harder on you, man. They just don't see you the same way." The family dynamic crystallized during my college years. I'd come home for holidays to find my bedroom converted to storage while Rebecca's remained a shrine to her high school years despite her dropping out of community college. I'd listen to my parents praise Rebecca's entrepreneurial spirit when she bounced between retail jobs, while my internship at a respected tech firm was acknowledged with a brief nod. Most painful was Rebecca's habit of blaming me for her failures. When she didn't get into her first-choice college, "Ethan made me feel stupid growing up, so I never tried as hard." When she couldn't hold a job, "It's hard living in the shadow of perfect Ethan." When her relationships failed, "I have trust issues because Ethan was always so judgmental." And always, my parents validated her narrative. "You could have been more supportive of your sister," my father would say, his disappointment palpable. "Rebecca has always looked up to you." My mother would add, "Couldn't you have been more understanding?" My coping mechanism became distance. I excelled academically, secured a good job as a web developer at a promising tech startup in Boston, and maintained just enough contact with my family to avoid complete estrangement. I'd attend obligatory holiday gatherings and occasional family dinners, each one a carefully choreographed dance of avoiding topics that might trigger Rebecca's insecurities or my parents' disapproval. The tension had been building for years before it finally erupted. Each family gathering became more strained than the last. Rebecca's jealousy grew more pronounced as I established myself professionally while she continued to drift. My parents' favoritism became more transparent as they funneled emotional and financial resources toward Rebecca while expecting complete self-sufficiency from me. Jason, who'd known my family since childhood, became increasingly concerned. "Your family is toxic, Ethan," he told me bluntly after a particularly tense Thanksgiving dinner last year. "They're never going to see you clearly, and it's killing you to keep trying." I dismissed his concern, still clinging to the hope that someday my parents would recognize my worth. That Rebecca would grow out of her victim mentality, that we could be the family I'd always wanted us to be. That hope persisted until Rebecca's wedding day 6 months ago, when everything finally shattered beyond repair. Rebecca's engagement to Michael Thompson came after just 4 months of dating, a whirlwind romance that raised red flags I tried my best to ignore. Michael was charming and confident, with a sales job that seemed to provide an impressive income judging by his designer clothes and luxury car. Rebecca was infatuated, transforming overnight into a woman who suddenly had direction and purpose, becoming Mrs. Michael Thompson. "He's the one, Ethan," she gushed over coffee when she first told me about the proposal. "He says I have potential no one else has ever seen in me." The wedding planning quickly spiraled into an extravaganza that seemed excessive even by today's standards. The venue was a historic mansion with ocean views. The dress was custom designed. The guest list swelled to 300 people, most of whom Michael insisted were essential business contacts. Each time I visited my parents, the estimated cost had increased. "Isn't this a bit much?" I finally asked my father, who looked unusually strained as he reviewed wedding vendor contracts at the kitchen table. "That's a down payment on a house you're spending. It's her special day," he replied defensively. "We want it to be perfect." I noticed my mother wincing as she wrote yet another check for the wedding planner. When I caught her alone later, her usual defense of Rebecca faltered. "Your father insisted," she whispered. "He's taken money from your college fund to cover some of it." "My college fund? Mom, I graduated years ago." "The money we set aside for your graduate school," she clarified, not meeting my eyes. The revelation stunned me. I'd been saving for years to pursue an MBA, assuming I was on my own as always. Learning that my parents had secretly set aside funds for my education, only to redirect them to Rebecca's wedding, felt like a punch to the gut. Still, I kept my concerns to myself until 3 weeks before the wedding when I accidentally discovered something troubling. While helping Michael set up a shared cloud storage account for wedding photos as a favor to Rebecca, I noticed files that didn't belong, gambling receipts, overdue notices, and screenshots of payday loan applications. Most concerning were emails suggesting Michael was involved in some questionable business dealings that skirted legal boundaries. I faced a moral dilemma. Should I speak up and risk being labeled the jealous brother trying to ruin Rebecca's happiness? Or should I stay silent and potentially allow my sister to marry someone who could destroy her financially and perhaps legally? After sleepless nights deliberating, I decided I had to say something, but carefully. I invited Rebecca for coffee at our childhood park, a neutral ground where we'd shared rare moments of sibling connection. "I'm concerned about Michael's financial situation," I began gently after we'd settled on a bench. "I think there might be some gambling issues and possibly some questionable business practices." I expected immediate denial and accusation. Instead, Rebecca surprised me with a moment of vulnerability. "I know about the gambling," she admitted quietly. "He promised it's under control. He's getting help." "And the business stuff?" "Rebecca, some of those emails looked like potential fraud." She tensed but nodded slowly. "He explained that to me. It's just aggressive sales tactics. Not actually illegal. He's going to tone it down now that we're getting married." We talked for nearly 2 hours, the longest civil conversation we'd had in years. Rebecca acknowledged her concerns about rushing into marriage but insisted she loved Michael and believed in his promises to change. I offered to help them create a financial plan after the wedding, and she agreed that might be helpful. Thank you for caring enough to say something, she said as we parted with a rare hug. I know we haven't always been close, but you're still my brother. I drove home feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe Rebecca was finally maturing. Maybe we could build a healthier sibling relationship after all. The wedding went ahead as planned. I gave a carefully worded toast that celebrated love and new beginnings without veering into insincerity. Michael charmed everyone, including me almost despite myself. Rebecca was radiant. For once, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps my concerns were overblown, that Michael would indeed change for the better. Motivated by his love for my sister. That fragile hope lasted exactly 7 days. The family dinner was supposed to be a small celebration, our first gathering since the wedding. Michael was conspicuously absent, with Rebecca explaining he had an unavoidable business emergency. My mother had prepared all of Rebecca's favorite dishes, and my father had opened an expensive bottle of wine. The conversation flowed easily at first, with Rebecca sharing honeymoon highlights and my parents beaming with pride. I should have recognized the warning signs: Rebecca's slightly manic energy, the way she kept checking her phone, the third glass of wine she poured before the main course was served. But I was distracted, relaxed even, lulled into a false sense of security by our recent breakthrough conversation. The explosion came without warning. So I got a call from the bank today, Rebecca announced suddenly, her voice tight. Apparently, there's a problem with our mortgage application. What kind of problem? My father asked, instantly alert. They said Michael's credit score is too low. They mentioned multiple recent loan applications and gambling debts. Her eyes fixed on me with sudden intensity. Information that someone must have reported to them. Rebecca, I didn't. I started, but she cut me off. You did this, she screamed, slamming her hand on the table hard enough to rattle the dishes. You couldn't stand to see me happy, could you? You had to ruin it like you ruin everything. That's not true, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. I never contacted any bank. You told me you already knew about. Michael and I were fine until you started poking around in our business. Now he's stressed all the time. We're fighting constantly, and the bank won't give us our dream house. My mother reached for Rebecca's hand. Honey, I'm sure Ethan didn't mean to. He's always been jealous of me. Rebecca continued, tears streaming down her face. Always trying to make me look bad. Always the perfect son while making sure everyone knows what a screw-up I am. That's not fair, I said, my calm facade cracking slightly. I've only ever tried to help you. Help me? Her laugh was bitter, hysterical. You've been undermining me my entire life. And now you've ruined my marriage before it's even started. I looked to my father, expecting him to intervene, to recognize the irrationality of Rebecca's accusations. Instead, I saw his jaw tighten, his eyes narrow, an expression I recognized from childhood. Disappointment. Judgment. Directed at me. Son, he said in that measured tone that always preceded criticism. Was it really necessary to interfere in your sister's marriage? The betrayal hit like a physical blow. I didn't interfere. I expressed concern to Rebecca privately. She told me she already knew about Michael's issues. And then you went behind her back to the bank? My mother asked, her voice trembling. What? No. I would never do that. I haven't contacted anyone about Michael. Rebecca was sobbing now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. First, my honeymoon is ruined because Michael is stressed about money. Then we come home to find out we can't get our house. And now he's gone all day and night trying to fix what you broke. Rebecca, listen to me. I had nothing to do with the bank's decision. Michael's financial problems are his own doing. I only... Why don't you just disappear? She screamed, rising from her chair. My life was perfect until you ruined it. Why can't you just leave us alone? The silence that followed was deafening. I looked from Rebecca's contorted face to my mother's tears to my father's stony glare. No one defended me. No one questioned the logic of Rebecca's accusations. No one acknowledged that banks don't deny mortgages based on rumor but on documented financial history. My father finally broke the silence. "Ethan, I think you've done enough damage." "Thomas," my mother said weakly, not in objection but in a plea to handle the situation. "No, Margaret. I'm tired of this." My father turned to me, his expression cold. "Your sister has always tried to make her own way, despite living in your shadow. The one time she finds happiness, you can't stand it. Your jealousy has torn this family apart." I sat stunned, unable to process the complete inversion of reality I was witnessing. In what universe was I the jealous sibling? In what reality had Rebecca lived in my shadow rather than the reverse? "Dad, that's not what happened," I said quietly. "I was trying to protect Rebecca from." "From what? From being happy? From having what you don't?" My father's voice rose uncharacteristically. "You've always thought you were better than everyone, Ethan. Always so quick to judge. Always so perfect. Well, look what your perfection has done to your sister." Rebecca was still sobbing, now comforted by my mother, who shot me a look of profound disappointment over her daughter's shoulder. "Why can't you just let your sister be happy?" my mother asked softly, the question cutting deeper than my father's anger. I looked around the table at my family, the people who were supposed to know me best, to love me unconditionally, and realized with sudden clarity that they didn't see me at all. They never had. The person they were attacking wasn't me but a projection of their own making, a convenient villain in the family narrative. I could have argued. I could have defended myself. I could have pointed out the absurdity of blaming me for Michael's documented financial problems that predated my awareness of them. I could have reminded them of all the times I'd supported Rebecca despite her constant undermining. But in that moment, looking at their unified front against me, I realized it would be pointless. They had made their choice long ago, and it wasn't me. So I didn't argue. I simply stood up, placed my napkin beside my barely touched plate, and walked out of the house without another word. Behind me, I heard Rebecca's sobs, my mother's consoling murmurs, and most painfully, my father's heavy sigh of disappointment. But for the first time in my life, I didn't carry that disappointment with me. I left it behind where it belonged. The night air felt unusually crisp as I walked to my car, each breath slightly painful in my constricted chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, adrenaline and shock creating a disconnect between brain and body. The physical sensation of betrayal surprised me, the tightness in my throat, the burning behind my eyes, the hollow feeling in my stomach as though something vital had been scooped out. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, muscle memory navigating familiar streets while my mind replayed the scene at dinner from every angle, searching for something I might have said or done differently. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Jason's apartment building. He opened the door in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, took one look at my face, and wordlessly stepped aside to let me in. "They chose her," I said simply when we were seated in his living room, a beer in my hand that I couldn't bring myself to drink. Again. Completely. Finally. Jason listened without interruption as I recounted the evening's events, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or easy comfort. "What are you going to do now?" he asked instead. The question crystallized something in me. "Leave," I said with sudden certainty. "Not just the house. The whole situation. I'm done." The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I'd never done without legitimate illness. I spent the day searching for apartments, finding a small one-bedroom unit in a renovated industrial building across town. The landlord, impressed by my credit score and income verification, allowed me to sign the lease and move in immediately with an expedited background check. I returned to my parents' house mid-afternoon when I knew everyone would be out. I packed efficiently, taking only what was unquestionably mine: clothes, personal electronics, books, and a few photographs, mostly from college and after, when I'd begun building a life separate from my family. I left behind childhood trophies, family photos, and anything that existed in the murky territory of shared ownership. I wrote a check for the next 3 months of what I'd been contributing to household expenses, left it on my stripped bed, and closed the door on my old life. The apartment was sterile and echoing, with industrial concrete floors and exposed brick walls. The emptiness matched my emotional state, scoured clean, minimalist, without warmth but also without pretense. I arranged delivery of basic furniture and spent that first night on an air mattress, staring at the ceiling and feeling strangely peaceful despite everything. I returned to work the next day, throwing myself into coding with an intensity that both impressed and concerned my colleagues. Rachel, a UX designer I'd been friendly with, was the first to notice the change. "You seem different," she said during a coffee break 3 days after my move. "More focused but also, I don't know, harder somehow." I surprised myself by telling her the abbreviated version of what had happened. Rachel, whose parents had emigrated from South Korea when she was a child, nodded with unexpected understanding. "Family isn't simple," she said. "Sometimes the healthiest thing is distance." Rachel became an unexpected ally in my new life, introducing me to her friend group, other young professionals who had created chosen families in the absence of healthy biological ones. Weekend hikes, board game nights, and impromptu dinners gradually filled the space where family obligations had once been. Jason remained my closest friend, helping me furnish my apartment and checking in regularly. "How are you really doing?" he'd ask, refusing to accept my automatic "fine" response. The truth was complicated. Some days I felt liberated, relieved to be free from the constant expectation of failure, the predetermined role of villain in the family drama. Other days, usually when something good happened at work, or I saw a movie I knew my dad would enjoy, the absence ached like a phantom limb. On Jason's recommendation, I started seeing Dr. Samantha Wells, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became anchors as I navigated unfamiliar emotional territory. "What you're describing is scapegoating," she explained during our third session. "Families sometimes unconsciously select one member to bear the blame for collective dysfunction. It allows everyone else to avoid accountability." "But why me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since childhood. "Often it's the strongest member, the one least likely to break under the pressure," she said. "Or the one who most threatens the family's preferred narrative." Through therapy, I began to understand that my academic success and emotional stability had paradoxically made me the perfect repository for family blame. My independence threatened the codependent dynamic between my parents and Rebecca. My achievements highlighted what Rebecca could have accomplished with similar effort. "Your family created a story where Rebecca needs protection and support while you are invulnerable," Dr. Wells explained. "That story served everyone except you." The hardest part of therapy was acknowledging my own role in maintaining the dynamic, my persistent hope for approval, my willingness to accept blame, my reluctance to establish boundaries. I had participated in my own diminishment out of love and loyalty, qualities my family had exploited rather than appreciated. 6 months passed in this new reality. I was promoted at work, made new friends, developed routines that prioritized my well-being. I hadn't blocked my family's numbers, but I hadn't reached out either. They made a few desultory attempts at contact in the first month, a terse text from my father asking where I'd gone, a tearful voicemail from my mother, a single-line email from Rebecca blaming me for abandoning the family. I responded to none of them, and eventually the attempts stopped. The silence between us grew until it felt permanent, a void too wide to bridge. And then, exactly 6 months after I walked out of my parents' house, my phone exploded with notifications. 14 missed calls overnight. 5 from Rebecca. 4 from my mother, 3 from my father, and 2 from my Uncle Robert, my father's brother who I'd always been close to. Voicemails ranging from angry to pleading. Text messages hinting at catastrophe. Emails marked urgent and family emergency. Something had happened, something significant enough to break 6 months of silence. I stared at my phone for a long time, my thumb hovering over the call button, wondering if I was ready to reopen that door. The first voicemail was from Rebecca. Her voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "Ethan, it's me. I know you hate me, but you need to call back. It's important." The second, also from Rebecca, came 3 hours later. The edge in her voice now tinged with desperation. "Please call me back. I wouldn't contact you if it wasn't an emergency. Please." My mother's first message was tearful, as I'd expected. "Ethan. Honey, we need to talk to you. Please call us back. We're worried sick." My father, predictably, started with command rather than request. "Ethan, this is your father. Call home immediately." But his second message, left at 2:14 a.m., revealed uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Son, please. We need your help." Uncle Robert's messages were the most straightforward. "Ethan, it's Uncle Rob. Something's happened with Michael. Your family is in trouble. Call me, not them, if you want the unvarnished truth." The text messages filled in some blanks. Michael had disappeared. Bank accounts were empty. Rebecca was hysterical. My parents were beside themselves. The house might be at risk. Each message contained another piece of an emerging disaster. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in pajama pants, coffee growing cold beside me as I processed the information. The vindication I might have expected to feel was overshadowed by genuine concern. Despite everything, these were people I had loved my entire life. I called Dr. Wells before making any decisions. "This is clearly a crisis for them," she acknowledged when I'd explained the situation. "But that doesn't obligate you to rush in as rescuer. What are you feeling right now?" I considered the question carefully. Worried, honestly. But also cautious. "I don't want to be pulled back into old patterns." "That's very insightful," she said. "Remember our discussions about boundaries. Helping doesn't mean sacrificing your emotional health or absolving them of responsibility for how they treated you." After our call, I texted Uncle Robert, the family member I trusted most, to give me an accurate assessment. "Can meet in person to discuss. Coffee shop on Newberry at noon?" His reply came instantly. "I'll be there. Thank you, Ethan." Uncle Robert arrived at the coffee shop looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. My father's older brother had always been the more relaxed, approachable Mitchell, with laugh lines instead of stress furrows and a genuineness my father lacked. Today, however, he looked worn and worried as he clasped my hand firmly. "You look good," he said, studying me. "There's something different about you. 6 months of boundaries will do that," I replied with a small smile. "What's happening, Uncle Rob?" He sighed heavily, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug. "Michael cleaned out their accounts 3 days ago. All of them, joint accounts with Rebecca, business accounts, everything. Then he disappeared. Left a note saying he had gambling debts that got out of hand, people were threatening him, he had to go underground." My stomach tightened. "How much?" "Nearly everything your parents had. Apparently, they'd been funding his business ventures for months. Second mortgage on their house, liquidated investments, even took loans against their retirement accounts." He paused, looking at me directly. "Rebecca convinced them you were wrong about Michael, that you were just jealous. They believed her." The irony wasn't lost on me. "And now?" "Now they're facing possible bankruptcy. The house will probably go into foreclosure. Rebecca moved back home 2 days ago, completely broken. She's the one who finally admitted you had tried to warn her about Michael's gambling." I absorbed this information silently, feeling a complex mix of emotions, concern for my family's well-being tangled with the lingering hurt of their betrayal. Why call me now? I finally asked. What do they expect me to do? Uncle Robert shrugged. They know you're financially stable. I think they're hoping you'll bail them out, honestly. But that's not why I contacted you. No. I contacted you because regardless of what happened between you, they're your family. And they're in real trouble. Not just financially, but emotionally. This has broken something in them, Ethan. Especially your father. I considered this. I can't just forget the last 32 years because they need me now. I'm not suggesting you should, he said quickly. God knows they've treated you unfairly for years. I've tried to tell your father that, but... He trailed off, shaking his head. I'm just saying. Maybe this is an opportunity for honest conversation. They're finally seeing clearly, without Rebecca's filter. I felt a familiar pull, the responsible son, the fixer. The one who puts family above self. But 6 months of therapy had given me new awareness. I'll meet with them, I decided. But I'm not promising financial help. And I'm not walking back into the same dynamic. Uncle Robert nodded, relief visible in his expression. That's fair. More than fair, given everything. As I drove home to prepare for the meeting, my phone rang again. This time I answered. Ethan? It's Rachel. A few of us are getting together tonight for dinner if you want to join. The normalcy of the invitation, the easy friendship it represented, reminded me of how much healthier my life had become. Thanks, but I can't tonight. Family situation. Ah, she said, understanding in her voice. The mysterious calls? Yeah. I'm meeting them later. Do you want backup? I make an excellent buffer at awkward family reunions. Her offer touched me. I appreciate that. But I need to handle this myself. Rain check on dinner? Absolutely. And Ethan? Remember who you are now, not who they expected you to be. I ended the call feeling grounded by the reminder that I had built a life with people who saw and valued me for myself. Whatever happened with my family, I wouldn't be facing it from a place of isolation and need, but from a position of strength and support. When my phone rang again, Rebecca's name flashing on the screen, I answered with calm confidence. Hello, Rebecca. Her sob of relief was immediate. Ethan, thank God. We need you. I know, I said simply. Uncle Robert told me what happened. I'll meet with you all tonight. Coffee shop on Newberry, 7 o'clock. The coffee shop? Why not come to the house? Because the coffee shop is neutral ground, I explained. And that's what I need right now. There was a pause, then a subdued, okay. Thank you, Ethan. As I hung up, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in our relationship, Rebecca had accepted my boundary without argument. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant, the first indication that maybe, just maybe, there was potential for change. The coffee shop hummed with evening activity, students with laptops, couples on casual dates, professionals unwinding after work. I arrived 20 minutes early to secure a corner table with some privacy, ordering a black coffee and taking slow, deliberate breaths to stay centered. My family arrived as a unit, my father leading, looking older than I remembered, followed by my mother whose nervous hands kept adjusting her scarf, and finally Rebecca, pale and thin, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. The sight of them, diminished and anxious, stirred complicated feelings I had to consciously set aside. Uncle Robert arrived separately a few minutes later, nodding encouragingly as he took the seat beside me, a small gesture of alliance that didn't go unnoticed by my father, whose jaw tightened briefly. Ethan, my mother began after an awkward silence, reaching across the table toward me but stopping short of actual contact. You look well. I am well, I confirmed, neither cold nor warm. Uncle Robert explained the situation with Michael. My father cleared his throat. It's worse than we initially realized. He's been embezzling from clients for months, using our home as collateral for loans, forging signatures. The authorities are involved now. Rebecca stared down at the table, silent tears tracking her makeup. I had no idea, she whispered. I believed everything he told me. The immediate problem, my father continued, his business voice failing to mask his desperation, is that we're facing foreclosure within 30 days. Our accounts are frozen pending investigation. We're in serious trouble, son. The old Ethan would have immediately shifted into problem-solving mode, offering reassurance and solutions. The new Ethan waited, observing the unspoken expectations. The familiar pattern reasserting itself. They were looking at me the way they always had, as a resource to be tapped, a reliable support beam for the family structure. I understand this is difficult, I said carefully. I'm sorry you're going through it. We thought maybe. My mother began hesitantly, glancing at my father. We need financial help, my father stated bluntly. Temporarily. Just until we can sort this mess out. Your mother and I know you've been successful, that you have savings. We wouldn't ask if we had any other option. Rebecca finally looked up. Her expression a familiar mix of entitlement and vulnerability. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, Ethan. But I have nowhere else to go. No job, no savings, nothing. Again. I felt the pull to rescue, to prove my worth through sacrifice. Again I resisted. Before we discuss any financial arrangements, I said evenly, we need to address what happened 6 months ago. And the years before that. My father's expression hardened. Is this really the time for rehashing old grievances? Your sister is in crisis. It's exactly the time, I countered, maintaining eye contact. Because this pattern is exactly why we're sitting here now. Uncle Robert shifted beside me. Thomas, listen to him. Really listen for once. My father's mouth opened then closed without words, surprised by his brother's directness. My mother looked between them anxiously while Rebecca seemed to shrink further into herself. For as long as I can remember, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I've been cast as the strong one, the capable one, the one who doesn't need support or acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Rebecca has been portrayed as fragile, special, deserving of endless chances and resources. That's not true. My mother protested weakly. We've always been proud of you. No, Mom. You've always expected achievement from me. It's not the same thing. My successes were obligations fulfilled, not celebrated accomplishments. My concerns were dismissed as jealousy. My boundaries were labeled as selfishness. Rebecca's tears flowed faster. I never meant. Let me finish. I said, not unkindly but firmly. 6 months ago, I tried to protect Rebecca from exactly this situation. I saw the warning signs with Michael and spoke to her privately, respectfully. And what happened? She accused me of trying to ruin her life. You. I looked at my parents, backed her without question. You told me my jealousy had torn the family apart. My father's complexion reddened. We were wrong, he admitted, the words seeming physically painful for him. We see that now. Do you? I asked. Because I'm concerned that once this crisis passes, we'll fall right back into the same dynamic. I'll be the reliable son who sacrificed to save everyone, expected to forget the hurt and rejection until the next time Rebecca needs rescuing. My mother began to cry silently. My father stared at his clasped hands on the table. Uncle Robert sat steady beside me, a silent support. I don't want to be rescued, Rebecca said suddenly, her voice small but clear. Not anymore. I need to learn how to stand on my own. I should have listened to you about Michael. I should have been honest with myself about who he was, who I was becoming with him. I'm sorry, Ethan. Truly sorry. Her apology, perhaps the first genuine one she'd ever offered me, landed like a weight lifted. Not enough to erase years of pain, but enough to crack open a door to possibility. My father looked up, his expression vulnerable in a way I'd never witnessed before. I failed you as a father, he said, voice rough. I convinced myself I was being fair, that Rebecca needed more support. But the truth is, I expected more from you because it was easier. You never demanded attention the way she did. You never fell apart. I took advantage of your strength instead of nurturing it. We both did. My mother added, reaching for my father's hand. We told ourselves we were balancing our attention between two very different children, but we weren't. We were unfair to you, Ethan. Deeply unfair. The acknowledgement I'd craved for decades sat between us, powerful but insufficient on its own. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. But rebuilding trust will take more than words in a moment of crisis. It will take consistent action over time. Uncle Robert finally spoke. Ethan has every right to walk away right now. The fact that he's even sitting here shows more character than most would have in his position. My father nodded slowly. What do you want from us, son? The question surprised me. Never before had my father asked what I wanted rather than telling me what was expected. I want a relationship based on mutual respect, I said after a moment's reflection. I want acknowledgement of my boundaries. I want Rebecca to take responsibility for her choices rather than blaming others. I want conversations where everyone's perspective is valued equally. And financially? My father pressed, unable to completely set aside the immediate crisis. I'll help you navigate options, I said firmly. I'll connect you with financial and legal resources. I'll support efforts that lead toward independence, not dependence. But I won't simply write checks that enable the old patterns to continue. Rebecca wiped her eyes. That's more than fair. More than I deserve. It's not about deserving, I corrected gently. It's about what's healthy for all of us moving forward. We spent the next hour outlining practical next steps, appointments with financial advisors I knew, legal consultations, job opportunities for Rebecca, budget restructuring for my parents. Throughout the conversation, I maintained clear boundaries, offering support without sacrifice, assistance without rescue. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, Will you come for dinner sometime soon? Not to discuss any of this, just to be family? The question hung in the air, weighted with hope and history. I considered it carefully before responding. Not yet, I said honestly. I need more time. But maybe we could meet here again next week, continue the conversation. She nodded. Disappointment visible but acceptance present too, another small shift in the family dynamic. As they left, Uncle Robert lingered. You handled that with extraordinary grace, he said. Your Dr. Wells would be proud. I smiled slightly. I'm trying to find the balance, caring for them without sacrificing myself. For what it's worth, he said, clasping my shoulder. I think tonight was a beginning, not just of their recovery from this crisis, but of something healthier for all of you. I wasn't yet convinced, but for the first time in a long time. I felt something like hope when I thought about my family, not the desperate hope of finally winning approval, but the calmer hope of building something new on more solid ground. Over the following weeks, I maintained the boundaries I'd established while following through on my commitments to help. I connected my father with Greg Martinez, a financial advisor I trusted, who helped them develop a structured bankruptcy plan that would allow them to preserve some assets while satisfying creditors. I introduced my mother to Janine Wilson, a former colleague who managed a bookstore and needed part-time help, a position that suited my mother's love of literature and provided modest but stable income. For Rebecca, I took a different approach. Rather than solving her problems, I accompanied her to a career counseling center, waiting in the lobby while she met with advisors to assess her skills and interests. When she emerged with information about administrative assistant training programs, I supported her decision without taking over the process. I can help with tuition, I offered during one of our now regular coffee meetings. But the applications, the work, that needs to be your journey, She nodded, a new seriousness in her expression. I want to do this myself. I need to know I can. My relationship with each family member evolved at its own pace. My father, uncomfortable with emotional vulnerability, found it easier to connect through practical matters. We met weekly to review financial progress, conversations that gradually expanded to include tentative questions about my work, my apartment, my life. During one such meeting in late November, he paused while reviewing bankruptcy documents. I saw an article about your company in the Business Journal. The innovations you're developing. I am proud of you, Ethan. The words, so long desired, now received with measured appreciation rather than desperate gratitude. Thank you, Dad. That means something to me. I should have said it more, he acknowledged. Eyes on the papers between us. Much more. The most surprising conversation came 2 months after our coffee shop meeting, when my father asked to meet alone at a park near his office. We walked in silence for several minutes before he spoke. I owe you an explanation, he said finally. For the favoritism. It wasn't fair to you, and you deserve to understand why. I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. Rebecca reminded me of my younger sister, Elaine. He named an aunt I'd never met, who died before I was born. Same temperament, same struggles. Elaine was troubled, brilliant but fragile. I couldn't save her. When Rebecca started showing similar patterns, I overcompensated. Tried to protect her in ways I couldn't protect Elaine. You never told me about this, I said quietly. I've never discussed it with anyone except your mother. He stopped walking, turning to face me. It's not an excuse, Ethan. It's an explanation. I projected my fears onto Rebecca and my expectations onto you. Neither was fair. The revelation didn't erase decades of hurt, but it offered context, humanity. My father was flawed. Wounded in ways I hadn't known, making mistakes born of his own unresolved pain. Thank you for telling me, I said simply. My mother's approach to reconciliation was more direct. She invited me for lunch at a small cafe, arriving with a photo album I'd never seen before. I kept these separate, she explained, opening to pictures of me throughout childhood, receiving academic awards, building science projects, reading under trees. I've always seen you, Ethan. I just didn't know how to balance everything. Rebecca demanded so much, and you seemed so self-sufficient. She turned to a photo of me at 10, standing beside a model solar system that had won first prize. You worked on this for weeks. Your father was traveling for business. Rebecca had some drama at school that consumed all our attention. You just quietly excelled, as always. I remembered that science fair, the pride in my achievement shadowed by my family's absence at the ceremony. I should have been there, my mother said, as if reading my thoughts. I made so many wrong choices, prioritizing the squeaky wheel over the quiet achiever. I confused need with love, Ethan. I'm deeply sorry for that. These conversations, painful but necessary, continued through the fall and into winter. With Dr. Wells' guidance, I navigated the complex emotions they triggered, anger, grief, cautious hope, without losing myself in the family dynamic again. Rebecca's journey was perhaps the most profound. Without Michael, without our parents' enabling, she struggled but slowly found her footing. She completed her administrative training, secured an entry-level position at an insurance office, and moved into a modest apartment with a roommate. I've never actually supported myself before, she admitted during a dinner at my apartment in early December. It's terrifying. And also, empowering. You're doing well, I told her sincerely. She shook her head. I'm doing the bare minimum of adult responsibility. Something you've managed since you were practically a teenager. She set down her fork, meeting my eyes directly. I resented you for so long, Ethan. For making everything look easy. For not needing the constant attention and reassurance I craved. I told myself you had it better, easier. I never acknowledged how much we all took from you. The acknowledgement, freely given rather than extracted in crisis, meant more than I could express. By spring, 6 months after the confrontation at the coffee shop, we had established a new normal. My parents had downsized to a small rental, humbled but gradually rebuilding. Rebecca was steadily advancing at her company, developing confidence independent of external validation. I had maintained my separate life while allowing controlled reintegration of family relationships. We gathered for dinner at a restaurant to mark 6 months of this new chapter. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, perhaps ever, each of us more authentic, more aware of patterns to avoid, more intentional about interactions. "I'd like to propose a toast," my father said, raising his water glass. "To new beginnings, hard-earned wisdom, and the courage to change." We clinked glasses, the simple ritual symbolizing a family transformed through crisis and honesty. Later that week, I met Sarah Chin for coffee. We'd been introduced by Rachel at a company event, her warm intelligence and straightforward manner instantly appealing. Our conversation flowed easily, touching on work, hobbies, and eventually family. "It's complicated," I said when she asked about my relationship with my parents. "We're rebuilding after some difficult years. Family usually is complicated," she replied with understanding. My own parents and I went years barely speaking before we found better ways to connect. Her acceptance of complexity without judgment felt refreshing. As we parted with plans for dinner the following weekend, I realized I was approaching this potential relationship differently, not seeking validation or approval, but genuine connection based on mutual respect. In my next session with Dr. Wells, I reflected on the changes of the past year. "I've realized something important," I told her. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It means choosing not to let that hurt determine my future relationships." She smiled. "That's a profound insight, Ethan. How are you feeling about where things stand now?" "Still cautious," I admitted, "but hopeful. The patterns haven't disappeared, but we're all more aware of them, more committed to disrupting them when they emerge." "And what about you? How have you changed in this process?" I considered the question carefully. "I've learned that my worth isn't dependent on what I do for others or how much I sacrifice. That setting boundaries isn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. That I deserve to be seen and valued for who I am, not just what I contribute. Those are powerful realizations," Dr. Wells noted. "What would you say to someone facing a similar family dynamic?" "I'd tell them that walking away doesn't have to be permanent, but sometimes it's necessary to create the space for real change. That reconciliation requires genuine acknowledgement and consistent effort from all parties. And most importantly, that their value exists independently of their family's ability to recognize it." As I left her office, spring sunshine warming my face, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. The healing wasn't complete and perhaps never would be entirely. But I had found my way to a life defined by authenticity rather than obligation, by healthy connections rather than desperate approval seeking. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah confirming our dinner plans, followed by a message from Rachel about a weekend hiking trip, then a tentative invitation from my mother for Sunday brunch. Each represented a different type of connection in my expanding life: romantic possibility, chosen family, biological family working towards something healthier. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined my present or determined my future. In walking away when I needed to, in returning on my own terms, I had discovered the most important boundary of all, the one that defined who I was apart from others' expectations and projections. This wasn't an ending but a continuing journey. Family healing isn't a destination but a practice, requiring ongoing awareness and intention. What mattered was that for the first time, we were all doing the work. All committed to something healthier than what came before. If you've ever had to walk away from toxic relationships to preserve your own well-being, I hope my story offers some comfort and validation. Sometimes distance is necessary for healing, and boundaries are essential for healthy relationships. What choices have you made to protect your mental health in difficult family situations? Share in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage and clarity on your own path to healing.